Simply put, relay services allow people with hearing or speech disabilities to communicate with the hearing community through a relay operator. While many strides in relay communication have come about recently, its roots go back to the years following the Civil War. In 1868, Christopher Sholes patented the first electric typewriter, and in the early 1900s, the teleprinter or teletype was invented. The term TTY is short for teletype, which is short for teletypewriter. In the first half of the 20th century, teletype machines were used by the military, the New York Stock Exchange, and newswire services to transfer information. But by the 1960s, these machines became obsolete, and there was a large surplus of teletype equipment, primarily from the government. In 1964, deaf physicist Robert Weitbrecht, who was also a ham operator, saw the value of this surplus and, along with his colleagues, developed a modem that allowed deaf people to use these teletypes to communicate with one another. But there were problems. The machines were large, heavy, and very slow, with only one side of the conversation able to take place at a time. Some of the machines were in bad repair. Long distance was costly, and there were no relay systems in place for the deaf to make calls to the hearing community. In the late 1960s, Telecommunications for the Deaf, Inc., TDI, became an advocate for accessible telecommunications. Its first national directory had over 145 listings. By the mid-1970s, a serious outcry had grown among the deaf community over lack of federal support to promote telecommunications access for people who are deaf or hard of hearing. The 1973 Rehabilitation Act called for TTYs in federal agencies, but the government did not begin installing them until 1976. And while deaf and hard of hearing people got the government's attention through the efforts of the National Center for Law and Deafness, it wasn't until the 1980s that some states began to provide relay services for their citizens. The right of people with disabilities to have access to telecommunication became national policy with the Telecommunications Act of 1982. The law mandated that telephones must be TTY and hearing aid compatible, and the first relay services were established to reduce the isolation between hearing and deaf communities. The Americans with Disabilities Act of the early 1990s took the policy to new heights, resulting in the introduction of a wide array of new technology. The Federal Communications Commission implemented 711, an easy-to-dial number for access to all telecommunications relay services. With the explosion of the internet and wireless communications, there are now many more options for deaf, hard of hearing, and speech-disabled people than just a few years ago. In addition to text devices, there are also many online, wireless, and even video services for those who use American Sign Language. Enhancements to relay services now allow users to dial directly without the aid of a communications assistant, and others provide a more real-time conversation between participants. The mobile revolution has had a profound effect on the deaf community, and as technology and awareness improve, so too will the lives of deaf, hard of hearing, and speech-disabled people.